Hi everybody, it's Crazy. It's Monday and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now before I get started, I gotta give a shout out to my trusted because you guys rock. To my Crazy fam, I love you guys. And to my patrons, thank you for your continued support. Now we're up to episode number 31. Last week we ended off with expand, show, and hide. Okay, so that's where we left off, and that's where we're going to continue on today. Now, because of the fact I didn't do a video last week, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more to this week instead of just keeping it right at 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, visual organization is a key aspect of working with logic bricks. You don't need to edit the values of a logic brick all the time, so you can often keep most of them hidden. You can hide or show one particular logic brick using the arrow to the left of its header. Now, let's switch over to here. Okay, so what it's talking about is, say we want to hide it, you just hit here. Or if you're really, not sure if that's going to work or not, you can hit here. Okay, you can show them or you can hide them. Now this does it for all. You can actually come up here and this means all, okay? You can hide them all. And say, for example, you've got all these objects, you can hide objects too. See? So now you can't even see them. So you actually have to show them in order to see them all, okay? Now, I don't know if you can hide them that way, but, the only way to do the objects is that way, okay? All right, so if you want to show and hide all the sensors or controllers or actuators of one object, simply click in its corresponding header. So in this one, okay, if I have a controller and I have an actuator, okay, you can always just click and click or same. Okay, now you can show all your actuators or hide all your actuators. Okay, you can also hide all your object for the actuators. Okay, so you don't need to show them. Okay, say you just don't want to deal with it. You don't have to. Okay, all right. So hiding and showing menus on the top of the logic editor, you can access the menu to quickly hide or show the bricks for sensors, controllers, and actuators for all the selected objects. Okay, so that's these guys right here. Each one has one, and you can hide or show all of them, or hide or show their objects. Okay. See, I didn't know that one, so now I'm gonna have to look back through some of my blends that I screwed up to see if I actually hit them by accident. Okay. All right. So next one is move. When you add a new logic brick, it will show up in the bottom of the logic brick stack of the active object. Okay. So when you add a new one, let's add a delay. There we go. Okay. So when it'll show up here, but say you wanted the delay to be before that. Okay. So you would actually click on these little arrows here to go either down or up. Okay. Very simple. You can move it up and down according to your need. In order to rearrange them, you need to set the logic brick to be unexpanded and use the up and down arrow keys. Now, as you see, I did it with it closed and open, or expanded and hidden. Okay, in the older Blender game engine, it used to have that, and here I am showing my age. That was back when Blender first got started. I believe after 2.5, I believe they actually started to progress to the, oh no, I'm sorry, it might have been 2.6. Correct me if I'm wrong, let me know in the descriptions. But I believe it was 2.5, but correct me if I'm wrong, it might be 2.6. But they used to have it to where you actually had to expand it in order to move it because these buttons wouldn't show up. Okay. All right, now states. States are going to be the fun ones. Okay, I love states. Even though I haven't learned enough about them, I need to learn a lot more. So, with that being said, above the list of an object controller, you can see a small but important plus icon right there. Okay, only above below the controller. Okay. You can also set the initial game states and the ones you want to see at that moment in the interface. Okay, so you can do these right here. Okay, you can have all of them, or you can hide them. Okay, so you want to lock it out to where you don't accidentally click on it. You can. And you can also show it up in the properties as well. Okay. So, and that selects all of them. So if we hit shift and just go whoop, whoop, take them all out. We only want that one to show for right now. Okay. In order to learn how to use the state system, look ahead to the end of this chapter in the state machine section. We're going to go deeper into this, so don't worry about it. We're getting into it. We will get into deeper. This is just an introduction to show you a little bit more about the logic brick systems and how they work and how each one works, not the state system, because it is a completely separate entity when it comes to understanding logic bricks. Okay, so states layers. When you play the game, the active states of a controller are the ones in the bottom row shown right here. Okay, these are your initial states. As you see, I have a couple of them, just magically appear here, because I had typed them in earlier. Okay, the states present in the top row, namely visible states, are a tool to help you visualize different states without messing with the initial state set. Okay, so this is your initial state set. This is what it's going to go to. These are here. You can actually look at each one or pick certain ones that you want, and it will not affect it. Okay, because the reset to the initial state every time you reopen your file. So when I close this file and reopen it, if I saved it, which I did not, as you can see up here, there's nothing up there stating anything, but it will go back to all of these. If I had it saved, it would automatically highlight all these areas here. So like that, and then this one would be like this, and one here, a couple here, and there. Okay, so it will show up again like this when you go to reload your file. So keep that in mind. A lot of people, go, oh my God, I messed it up. You didn't. As long as you don't mess with this one. If you did that, then yeah, you get to reset all your states all over again because you messed it up. Leave this one alone. Don't mess with this one, okay? Unless you want to change up your state order. All right, the states interface works like the layer system in Blender. Click to select one state and shift click to select more than one. Okay, so you can click one state, okay, see, or you can shift click to click multiple states. Okay. As for the Blender layers, states have no individual names for the time being, and they never will. You don't want to have to name your states. States are there to help you go from one to another. You 9 times out of 10 only want certain events to happen, and if you named a state 1, state 2, state 3, oh my God, that would just be a lot of what they call paperwork. You don't want that. Okay, so on down to properties. Okay, so if you're using I believe a UK keyboard, your properties will pop out to your left. If you're using a US keyboard, it will pop out to the right. Okay, and a lot of people are like, I don't know why mine pops up to the left. Probably because you have your keyboard function set to UK or to a different country. If you're using a different country's keyboard set, it will automatically change in Blender. And people are like, well, I want it over here to the left where everybody else has got theirs. Well, change your keyboard layout to the UK keyboard style, and it will actually switch it over. Try it out, you'll see what I'm talking about. But since I am using a US keyboard, mine will be off to the right. So in the book here, it will tell you the left panel in the logic editor allows you to add and edit your object game properties. Okay, so it says it's to the left. That means because the gentlemen who made this are actually using, overseas keyboards, like UK keyboards or whatever keyboard your nationality that you're using. What language you speak might help. I don't know the technical jargon for keyboards, but I know a US keyboard, and I always say UK keyboards, meaning that side of the world. Okay, so please don't take it wrong and don't sue me. Okay. All right, unlike the logic bricks, the visible game properties are those of the current active object only. Okay, As with other editor areas in Blender, you can hide and unhide this area with the Properties panel shortcut N. And as you see, I can hit N and whee, it pops up. Okay, so now that you know that that is that, okay, we can go over a few of these properties. Okay, properties are often used to store a variable characteristic of a game object. For example, life, energy, speed. Okay, in this case, you will be using property actuators to change the values of a property when hitting an enemy, accelerating, and other sorts of events. On top of that, property sensors or expression controllers can invoke different actions when you get to certain values. For example, in the game when the life and energy are 0. So, you can have this as in game as a property, and it would be an integer of, say, 0. If you get down to 0, you die in game. Okay. Add components is basically a modular deal. Not too sure about how to use those yet. I'm pretty sure the book is going to go into them a little bit. It may not. But if so, I'll probably add that on later on. Okay, let's see. Another way of using the properties is to determine how other objects will react to each one. Okay, as well as we will see later on in this chapter, there are a few sensors that rely on the existence of a property to interact with an object. Those physics sensors, near, collision, etc., work regardless of the property value. They check only for the property name, which can't be changed inside the game. So in other words, your property name, which is this right here, can't be changed in game. Okay, once this is set here, then that's it. That's what the name of this is. The only way you're going to do that is to change it here each time. Okay, let's see. Trying to look at my time to try to make sure I'm not trying to overdo y'all. Okay, the available properties are, okay, timer, string, float, integer, and boolean. Okay, a lot of people say boolean, boolean. However you say it, it just means, true or false. So now let's move ahead and look at the functionalities you can use. Okay, so let's go ahead and in here hit my end panel to get rid of that. Now let's go to the sensors, and the first one on our list, usually it's sometimes at the bottom, at the top, but it's in the A section. Okay, so let's continue on. Sensors are the first layer of interactions between your game objects and the game itself. So they need to be planned carefully to avoid overhead on your logic performance. It's usually a trade-off between maintainability and work speed. For the first stages of your project, you may be able to have multiple sensors for the same test. For example, individual collision sensors for different property and material checks. Later on, when and if performance becomes an issue, you can replace them for a more elegant solution with the same functionality. But for now, you should just focus on playing and experimenting with the presented tools. The next part of the chapter is structured to serve both as a continuous reading and reference guide. If you read it through, you will capture the big picture of the system, what you can do, and when you might use the specific features. I recommend you read it all at least once. Later, you can revisit this chapter for a deeper perspective on the presented functionalities. Okay, so the first part is the header. Okay, this right here is your header. Okay, the first part of this chapter, we mentioned some options presented in all the logic bricks. Now we will see with more details the properties that are specific for sensor headers as seen in here. Okay. first off we got is the name. Okay. Okay, a name can be used to identify your sensor, even when it's not expanded. You will refer to it from inside the expression and Python controller. So if I don't want it to be an, I know it's an always sensor, but always yeah, I usually use that for keyboard. But say we wanted to use K for that. That's what we named it. We named the always sensor K. So whenever we shorten this, we'll know that, hey, K. All right. If we used a keyboard, okay, for example, we wanted to use the W key, okay, for the name because why? We made the W the key for that keyboard sensor, okay? So when we hit the W key, it's going to do something, okay? So you can name it anything you want. A lot of people just leave it always for an always sensor, okay? All right, so you have a positive pulse, okay, or what they call true level triggering, okay? These are your pulse modes. All right, continuously sends positive pulses to the controller while the sensor is active. So when this is ticked, it's going to continue sending pulses all the time for however many ticks you have. Okay, so for every logic tick, it's going to click. It's like hitting the keyboard button every time. Okay, a pulse negative or negative triggering, which is this one right here, okay, continuously sends negative pulses to the controller while the sensor is not active. A negative pulse will not be sent before the sensor is positive at least once or the level is enabled. Okay, so this is a positive trigger, this is a negative trigger. So basically kind of like a key up, key down and key up. Okay, that's kind of how I look at it, but it might not be. All right, so frequency, that's this one right here, okay, sets how often, okay, the pulse will trigger the sensor. The frequency is actually the number of logic ticks that will be skipped before triggering the sensor again. Keep it at 0 to have the sensor pulse for every logic tick. So as you see, this says skip. So you're going to skip so many logic ticks. So if you want to skip 60 logic ticks, okay, then every 60 seconds, okay, every 60 ticks, it will fire. Okay, it will have either a positive or a negative, as long as either one of these two or both are on. Okay, let's see here. Level. That's this one right here. Okay, levels. The level triggers the controller at the beginning of the game or when the controllers are activated from a disabled state. Okay, so if you have this state, say you have it on this state here, if this state is disabled, okay, and it's not there, it doesn't work, okay, it's off, okay, when you got that state turned off, then this will trigger, okay. With this option, you can force negative signals. For example, a property is not inside a range, a mouse is not over your object, okay? In other words, if it's in the object, it will not do anything, but if it's outside the object, it will do something. Okay? See, a key is not pressed, so if the W key is not pressed, then and you're not pointing at the cube, it will do something, it will fire. Okay? Mostly used as part of a state system to force a sensor to be evaluated right after the state of an object changes. Okay, so that'd be like a good if statement. Good for if statements. If you know anything about Python, most people do. If you don't, you'll find out later on more about that. Okay, tap. All right, so tap triggers the sensor only one at a time. It works opposite to the pulse. And it's especially useful for physical sensors, keyboard sensors, and mouse sensors. So say for example you're over here and every time you tap your mouse button, okay, instead of having a mouse keyboard or mouse trigger, okay, that will trigger it. It will trigger the always to keep moving, okay. it will trigger once at a time. All right, so invert still triggers the sensor as it would normally, but sends a negative signal when it starts and a positive one when it stops being valid. So if you want it to be inverted and say it fires every time, but it's going to fire a negative pulse instead of. So if you wanted something to be false each time that this triggers, basically it's saying more so of if I'm not on the cube, fire. If I'm on the cube, let me try to get this right. If I'm on the cube, don't fire. If I'm off the cube, fire. So every time you do this, okay, it's going to either do one or the other. Okay, that's what invert does. It does opposite of what it's actually saying. All right, so let's see, where am I at on time? Yeah, I'm going to leave it here for at 20 minutes. This is what this is what you got started with so far. Next week, okay, I am actually going to go into what each one of the sensors do, and then we'll go into each controller, and then we're going to go into each actuator. Now, I haven't got started with the state system yet. I'm going to get to that when we get to the end of this part. It's at the close towards the end of the chapter. So that's it for this week. Check next week. I'm gonna try to remind myself to get these videos out for y'all, because I know y'all want to learn just as much as I do, but life events do take precedence, and it's kind of hard to do something when you can't do it. Okay, so until next time.